Who's destroying all of these limestone hills around Ipoh? Hello and welcome back to another episode of CILISELASA with me, Iqbal, and in conjunction with the Chinese New Year / Hari Raya season, we wanted to talk about something that you might have noticed on your Balik Kampung drive. Yeah, imagine thinking you'd be going on a nice, scenic drive only to be surrounded by what looks like a bunch of skinless KFC pieces. Now, the digging that's been going on the hills around Ipoh isn't a new thing. In fact, if you compare satellite pictures from the early 2000s to 2015, and then from 2015 to last year, 2025, you'll see just how much things have changed. And Malaysians have noticed too. So much so that a few years ago, when the Department of Agriculture put up this signboard saying "Tanah semua yang tak boleh diganti" in full view of one of the destroyed hills, Malaysia started roasting the shit out of it to the point that they took the signboard down. To do the story, we even went up to Ipoh ourselves and spoke to one guy who told us this.
There was one time when I went to this kind of tong, when I was trying to show my friends, hey, the scenery behind that cave-in is really nice. But who knows, when I walked all the way to the back, I saw a half-ruined mountain behind. So it kind of like shocked me.
Which leads us to ask, who's behind all of the destruction of these limestone hills? Whether or not this has actually been worth it for Perak, and what, if anything, can be done about it. So starting with question 1, who's doing all of this quarrying? Now, if you look at all of the hills on Google Maps, you'll be able to see the quarries, access roads, and even company names operating on a bunch of these sites. Most of these companies extract the limestone from the hills, which then gets turned into cement and used in all types of construction of buildings, or for the marble or granite countertops in your kitchen, or even in everyday items like toothpaste, paper, and paint, for example. But are these companies really who we should be getting mad at? Because the thing is, most of this is legal. In fact, illegal quarrying isn't common, especially not at this scale. Like, this isn't a case of a bunch of bad guys sneaking in at night to blast the rocks before running away. These are companies that have gotten permits, made plans, bought machines, and built factories all before they even began harvesting the rocks and selling them to make a profit. So the way this works is this: if a company wants to start digging up a mountain to extract its resources, they first have to submit a project proposal, usually to the state government where the site is located. After that, they have to conduct what's called an Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA, and then once that's complete, they submit it to the Department of Environment before it's later reviewed by a bunch of different agencies like the Land and Mines Department or the Mineral and Geoscience Department, among others. From there, for some projects, the proposal and the impact assessment gets opened up to the public for feedback, after which, if everything's approved, the company then gets a quarrying or mining license issued to them by the state government. So the thing is, there's already a whole process for how these hills get mined, which means if it's all done legally according to the government, then it's not a matter of who's doing it, but instead it's about whether or not this system is making the right trade-offs for the state. Which brings us to question 2. Is it worth it? We spoke to a few other people who shared their thoughts, and most of them had this to say.
You can see from a pro and cons perspective. It gives jobs, it provides to the economy, but the thing is that it's also ruining our nature. We are no longer as green as we used to be.
Because it's spoil the nature. When you dig all the limestone out, then the hill might deteriorate and collapse by itself.
It's a balance, right? You need some development in the area, right? But some of these things can't actually be replaced. Once you mine these areas, once you remove a lot of the nature around it, that's not something that's easily recoverable. That's been there for thousands of years.
And what they say makes sense, because when a limestone hill is quarried, the damage isn't just visual. A lot of these hills are biodiversity hotspots, which, as Dr. Lim Tek Wing, who teaches environmental science at the University of Nottingham, explains, many species here have evolved independently over millions of years and exist nowhere else on Earth.
So these quarry companies are destroying nature. They are causing species to go extinct. In fact, there is already one species that has gone extinct due to quarrying.
Take, for example, the microjewel snail, which lives solely on limestone hills in Malaysia, Sumatra, and Thailand. In fact, some species of these snails are so rare, the only place on Earth you'll find them is on a single limestone hill. Too bad these guys are now at risk of extinction because we've gone ahead and turned their entire habitat into the thing that your kids then lie to you about when you ask if they've brushed their teeth before bed. But that's just one example. In another paper, they found that out of the over 1,200 plant species that grow in these limestone environments, 21% were endemic to Peninsular Malaysia, while another 11% were strictly confined to these limestone habitats. So, does Malaysia really care about our country's biodiversity? Well, on paper, we've signed multiple international biodiversity agreements and treaties, but in practice, there are very few incentives for state governments to protect these ecosystems, especially when financial pressures are involved. Some states like Sabah, Sarawak, and Pahang have set up biodiversity councils, but Perak is one of the states that haven't. And it doesn't help that biodiversity isn't even listed as a core objective of the Department of Environment, which is why EIAs often focus on things like noise, dust, and traffic, but barely touch on extinction or permanent biodiversity loss. But of course, biodiversity isn't even the only way these limestone hills are environmentally significant. According to Sahabat Alam Malaysia, the unchecked quarrying operations are also the reason why erosion and flash floods have been getting worse over the years. Because of the way limestone affects how water moves, when the hills are reshaped, the natural system gets disrupted, then water flows faster, pressure builds up, and the risk of flooding increases. You can see this over the years in how big floods have been taking place more frequently from 1971 to 2006, 2007, 2010, 2014, 2017, and of course, the devastating flood that happened in December 2021. But okay, so if all these quarrying projects are so bad, why do they keep getting approved? And the thing is, this is where the picture gets complicated, because in reality, quarrying is actually a very efficient way to extract value from the land. Compared to something, for example, like logging, where huge areas of forest have to be destroyed before taking decades to regrow, quarrying pulls out a lot of economic value from a relatively small footprint.
I've never said the quarry industry is bad. I would agree with your statement that some of these quarry companies can be doing things in a really responsible way compared to logging, for example.
In fact, this was also a point raised by Parti Socialist Malaysia chairperson Dr. Jayakumar.
You cannot stick a position that there should be no more destruction, quarrying of limestone hills, At the same time, we also talk we need housing for the P40, we need the Borneo Highway, we need more hospitals. So we've got to be consistent, you see.
The point is, they're not entirely anti-quarrying as long as it's controlled. Reason being, because we need it. As a developing country, Malaysia built constantly homes, highways, rail lines, factories, among other things. Then there's also the issue of money. If you look at how much it takes to run the country, Malaysia's federal budget is close to 420 billion ringgit, while Perak's is only about 1.6. That gap kind of explains some things, because when states are pushed to generate their own income, quarrying kind of becomes hard to say no to. It's almost like asking an employee to care about the company without paying them properly. And so, with all this damage being done, you'd assume Perak would want to sell the hills for a good price, right? Well, in 2024, Perak made about 129 million ringgit from all quarrying activities, which includes everything from limestone to rare earths. Right now, there's no clear public breakdown showing just how much of that actually comes from limestone alone, which is a key part of the problem. Because the thing is, when we tried to look into how much the Perak government actually collects in royalties from selling off their limestone, the only thing we could find was this report from 2021 prepared for GCCP Resources, which is the largest company producing crushed limestone in Malaysia and listed on the Singaporean Stock Exchange. Based on their document, the royalty paid to the state for limestone seemed to be a flat rate of 2 ringgit 90 cents per ton, while export duties were about 5 ringgit 10 cents per ton. Compare that to countries like China, Philippines, or Myanmar, which charge anything from a 2% market value tax or more, which means if the prices of limestone go up, so do their royalties. And so the thing is, we don't know whether quarrying has been worth it for the state because we just can't find the numbers. And at the rate and scale at which these limestone hills in Ipoh have been getting destroyed, why are these figures so freaking hard to find? Which brings us to our last question. Is there anything that should or can be done about this? Well, again, the folks we've spoken to like Dr. Jay Kumar and Techwin don't argue that quarrying should stop overnight. So what they do push for instead is transparency. For example, we should be able to know who's approving these projects, how much money actually goes back to the state, and shouldn't people living nearby have a say before the hills around them get permanently destroyed? What's interesting is, international quarrying companies often face stricter rules because they're tied to global standards on reporting, including on biodiversity conservation. And so, if it can be done elsewhere, why not here? And so, going back to the original question, who's destroying the limestone hills in Ipoh? And if we had to make a list, it would probably include corporations not adhering to international standards, the federal government not making biodiversity a part of the UAE's charter, state governments selling a ton of limestone for less than the price of one nasi lemak, and us for driving past these hills a million times and letting this happen over the years. So let's try to fix that last one. Let's start with making noise. You're gonna see this on the way back for Chinese New Year and later for Raya, so we thought why not turn that into something useful? Which is why we're launching chili sauce Angpaos at 20 ringgit per pack, with proceeds going to groups like Kinta Valley Watch and others working on conservation efforts around the area. Now, you can bring these mountains of wealth to your friends and families, and make sure you talk about it, post about it, tag your MPs and aduns, ask them for more transparency about how these projects are approved and where the money goes. But in the meantime, have a happy Chinese New Year and Selamat Bulan Puasa while keeping it here on Chili Sauce for all current issues and more. Tambah Bedah.